Hey everybody, this is Dan Wilson, and you're listening to Everything Fab Four on Salon.com.
Welcome to Everything Fab Four, a podcast focused on fun and intelligent stories about the Beatles. I'm your host, Ken Womack, music culture columnist for Salon.com and a Beatles scholar and historian. No other band, or popular phenomenon for that matter, has enjoyed the global impact the Beatles have and continue to have more than 50 years later. They are part of our human fabric. They created music that continues to bring people together, and just about everyone has their own Beatles story to tell, some that are surprisingly deep and unexpected. This show seeks to draw those stories out in interesting and insightful ways. Remember, it's a Beatles world, and everyone has a story.
I saw the Beatles when I was 8 years old on Ed Sullivan. So I was laying on a wooden floor looking at an old black and white Zenith, and there they were. And I remember the first time I saw a picture of the Beatles, it showed, the drums with Ludwig on them, right? And I thought initially that Ringo's name was Ludwig because I didn't know anything about brand names and stuff like that yet,
Today's guests are the Boxmasters, an American rock band comprised of Grammy Award-winning recording engineer J.D. Andrew and Academy Award-winning actor Billy Bob Thornton. Formed in 2007, the Boxmasters have recorded a diverse catalog of music that touches on their shared love of the rock and roll of the 1960s. Listening to the Boxmasters, one can hear obvious odes to the Beatles, Byrds, and Beach Boys, but also important to the Boxmasters are the Mothers of Invention, Kris Kristofferson, John Prine, and Big Star. Since the formation of the band, several longtime friends have contributed to the sound, but the core of the Boxmasters has always been Andrew and Thornton. As primary songwriters, the sound of the Boxmasters has been an evolution as the duo constantly strive to find new inspiration, new sounds, and new means of expression. As a touring band, the Boxmasters have cultivated a rabid fan base across the United States and Canada. Opening for the likes of ZZ Top, Steve Miller, George Thorogood, and Kid Rock, the Boxmasters have succeeded in winning over large audiences. Their touring highlights include appearances at Levon Helm's Midnight Ramble in Woodstock, New York, a performance at Ramble at the Ryman in 2008, and the Grand Ole Opry in 2015, another in a growing resume of must-play venues. Their latest album is entitled 69, with an ensuing tour that includes a stop at Monmouth University's own Pollock Theater in June 2023. Welcome, Boxmasters. Thank you for being with me on release day. This is quite an honor.
Well, we're honored. Yeah, we love it, and it's also Cinco de Mayo, so it's a double holiday for us.
That's right. It's a big one. I have not had my Tex-Mex meal today yet, but I will. So I we're Everything Fab Four. I write a lot about the Beatles and have this podcast about the band, and so one of our favorite questions is about the Beatles and origin stories, and I'm curious about both of your Beatles origin stories. Where did it all start for you? What was the spark of energy that brought you to their world?
Well, do you want to field that one or me?
Yours is a better origin story.
I'm going to want both, though.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, so I grew up in Arkansas, around Hot Springs, Arkansas. And so anything we got, from when the Beatles came out, anything we got from, overseas, any news or those, magazines that they would have and stuff, we were over the moon. It essentially made everybody of my era want to be in a band like the Beatles. So I always tell people that it set the bar for all of us way too high. We were going to try to succeed, obviously, and it probably helped us out as songwriters and musicians and everything else. But at the same time, the bar was set with a band that you knew you were never going to be. So you spend your whole life, reaching for this thing that's impossible. But I think in a lot of ways it helps you. But I saw the Beatles when I was 8 years old on Ed Sullivan. So I was laying on a wooden floor looking at an old black and white Zenith, and there they were. And I remember the first time I saw a picture of the Beatles, it showed, the drums with Ludwig on them, right? And I thought initially that Ringo's name was Ludwig because I didn't know anything about brand names and stuff like that yet, So as an 8-year-old, I thought the drummer's name was Ludwig just for a few minutes until I read more. But anyway, there's not a real way to describe to people who didn't grow up with the Beatles exactly how it felt. I mean, like the essence of them and what it did to you. And, but it made us all fans of not only the Beatles, but the whole British invasion. I mean, we would watch, now there's so much criticism and so many, whoever puts a record out, it's always like you got people on the internet who don't like this one or do like that one and everything. And back then, we liked everybody who was on Ed Sullivan. I mean, it was Freddie and the Dreamers and the Kinks and Gary Lewis and the Playboys. We didn't care. It was just that was the kind of rock and roll that informed the rest of our lives. And, at the time, we didn't realize that they were playing, Carl Perkins songs and Chuck Berry and stuff and Buddy Holly, and that we were doing that too when we were, 10 or 12 in our first bands, but we kind of sounded more like that did. But when the Beatles did it, it just had its own sound. So it wasn't like, hey, let's sound like, Chuck Berry. They tried, but they sounded like the Beatles, And so it literally invented a new kind of music for all of us. And my first single that I ever bought with my own paws in Paula's record shop in Malvern, Arkansas, was I Want to Hold Your Hand.
What a gateway.
It was just, and to this day, a lot of people talk about the Beatles more progressive stuff, and once they got into the Sgt. Pepper era, or even Rubber Soul and Revolver, because it was so innovative and music was changing, and the Beach Boys, had Pet Sounds and all this. But I still, in my top 5 Beatles songs, would have to put I Want to Hold Your Hand. I mean, I just think it's like a perfect pop song.
I have to agree in all of the elements, the surf rock that George brought with, trying to get a West Coast sound in there. It's structured like a Broadway show tune.
Right.
Just amazing stuff. Now, JD, what about you? And feel free, if you're not sure the story's as good, just embellish.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm gonna try to do that, because I know I look older than Billy, but I'm actually a few years younger. So I wasn't there at the birth of the British invasion. So I grew up in Kansas, and there was a show on our local radio called Solid Gold Saturday Night. And it was just all songs from the 50s and 60s. And I loved that show. I recorded most of the shows. I'd sit there and cut the commercials out and listen to cassettes of the shows that I recorded. And certain nights would just be Beatles nights. And I remember telling one of my elementary school teachers, how I got to stay up late on Saturday night because I was listening to the Beatles be on there, and I was taping it, and I was so excited. And, my dad loved the Beatles, my mom, everybody, that's just what we listened to. We listened to the oldies, at that point, in the 70s. And so, I just loved it. I didn't listen to anything current, probably until, I was in late high school. I just, I love the Beach Boys. I love the Beatles, love Creedence. Those were the things I listened to for fun. And, it's, once I met Billy and we really started, diving deep in the sounds and, the structures and chords and everything, of the Beatles and all the other British invasion bands, it's just, it all kind of came back to me. It's like how much that music had influenced my life. Everything that I loved was kind of all there. And now, with our band, we just get to do that. We get to make the music we want and make it sound how we want. And the music that we love and we love the sound of is the music from the 60s. So
I love it. And Billy, you mentioned that the Beatles are essentially the outlier, right? I remember you said something like that in Rolling Stone in the mid 90s. And it really caught my eye because I hadn't thought about it in that way, that, their level of commercial and critical acclaim is unmatched. It's almost a fool's errand to try to do that, but there's really no reason why you shouldn't, which is what I love teaching our students about today, is that they have all of this great music that can be inspirational and, well, hell, just wonderful to have all their lives. Did you grow up in musical households?
Kind of. I mean, my uncle was a country musician, my mother's brother, and I actually played drums with him some when I was in high school. But, they were playing country music, and I had, hair halfway down my back. And, so they were playing VFW clubs and stuff. And so I was usually just trying to hide between sets so I didn't get beat up with a beer bottle or something. But, yeah, it was, and my mother was a lover of music, and she loved the Beatles. My dad was the only person I ever knew in my life who didn't, not only not like the Beatles, he didn't like music. I mean, literally. I've never heard of that. He liked two songs. He liked Puff the Magic Dragon, and he liked Easter Parade. Don, I don't know why. I mean, he was a hot-headed little English basketball coach, and he just didn't like music. He thought Johnny Cash, the way most parents felt about the Beatles, their hair was too long and they were too, made people go crazy and, whatever. He didn't even like Johnny Cash. And you'd think a guy like him would like Johnny Cash, but he used to say he just bellers like a bull. And so, but I had the Beatles models. I had all the magazines, Dave Clark 5 versus the Beatles. I had the Beatle wig. I had Beatle puzzles, just everything. I mean, I lived and breathed the Beatles my whole life. And the difficult thing about being a Beatles fan, it's almost like Chris Farley on Saturday Night Live when he had McCartney on there. And, he said, "Remember when you were in the Beatles?" And because anything you say about the Beatles has been said before and makes you sound like, I mean, if you said something like, my favorite artist of all time was Lonnie Johnson, the blues singer, they will go, "Wow, you must be really smart." But if you go, "Who's your favorite band?" "Oh, I really like the Beatles." Then it's like, and you can't say, even what I've said. I saw the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show. It changed my life. It's, but it's true. I mean, it's just true. But you can't say it and sound like you're some kind of groundbreaking interview.
What about you, JD? What was so it sounds like the household was supportive of your addictions.
Well, my dad, I think he was he wanted to be a musician. He started playing guitar, later in life, in his 30s. At some point, he started taking lessons, and he was kind of working on it a little bit until I stole his guitar. But we listened to the radio constantly. I remember we had a pickup truck because, we grew up on a farm, and so we'd have to go feed the cattle at night, and, the whole family would go, and we didn't have a radio in the truck, but we would all sing songs as a family, just driving down the road. my dad loved Alabama, so we'd sing a lot of Alabama songs. But yeah, I mean, my dad had played trumpet in high school band. And so, as soon as I was able to, I got past his trumpet. And my school that I went to was a very musical school from, the time I got there in second grade. The wife of the music teachers were a husband and wife duo. So the wife did elementary school and the husband did junior high and high school. And the music teacher was also the head of the local stagehands union. And so when I got old enough, when I was 14 or 15, he would start bringing us in to work at concerts and, unload trucks and, pull wires and things like that at the arena that was in town. So everything, it's like, it wasn't a performing arts school, but almost all of our school was in the choir and the band. And it was, a very musical kind of place. It was without really intending to be. And I think, I just soaked all that in, and I just loved setting up the speakers for a junior high dance, setting up the cassette player and however we set it up in those days, but, getting the big speakers out. I thought that was so cool. And so it's just, everything that we, did growing up, it's like, wow, I found out that you can actually, do that for a living. It's like you can carry around big speakers and you can plug in wires and things like that. And you can play music for people. And sometimes you get paid for it.
You mean like being a roadie, which I understand. Have you both been roadies or just you, Billy?
Oh, we've both been roadies. So we've been chewed out a lot. So we try to be really nice to our guys, because we remember when we were on the other side of it,
Yeah, we're both sound guys,
Yeah.
We both ran front of house for various acts at various times in our youth. It's pretty wild that, we are on the other side. And honestly, yeah, we do kind of baby our crews a bit more probably than a lot of artists do out there. But, we have been on that side.
One of the things that my students love to hear about, because they discover the Beatles very differently than we do. They go out and they hear, I think they discover them in the same way, in the sense that, they'll hear a song and think, my God, where has that been all my life? And then they'll head to whatever their favorite streamer is, and they can consume it, whole. And one of the things we talk a lot about in class is what that whole means, right? And the thing that keeps me coming back is the way you start with Love Me Do and you end with, the Abbey Road medley, essentially. There is no other ride like that in the history of art. Shakespeare, as great as Shakespeare is, he's up and down, right? James Joyce doesn't do that. Picasso didn't have that level of upward momentum. What was it like, Billy, to experience that as that happened?
Well, every time a new Beatles record came out, it was exciting, of course. But then we sort of grew with the records. I mean, we were with each year and with them changing, we were also changing. And, I wasn't old enough, from 64 to, like 69 there. I mean, I only went to 13, 14 years old or something.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like I was 17 or 18 and was, already into acid or anything. So I didn't experience it that way. My only experience with it was the music and the style. So I would see the styles changing. And I think probably when I really noticed that, oh, wow, these guys, they do something other than She Loves You. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like, it was when I heard the Rubber Soul album and like everybody else did. And it was like, hang on a second, this is really this is really good. It still sounds like that, but kind of not. What is it? Because we weren't sure. We weren't old enough to know, you know? And you grow up and it's kind of like, you know what it was like with the Beatles finding out who they became, you know, or who they changed to as the years went on. It was like, you know, when you're growing up in a small town like I did, and then when you get older and you're having a dinner with your mom, and you say, "Hey, how's Dr. Smith?" or whatever, and she goes, "Well, you know, he had an affair with your aunt so and so, and then you know, and he's actually your uncle or what." I don't know, you know what I mean? And so when you start hearing that these guys were like experimenting with acid, and this guy was mean to that guy, and all this stuff, you know, we just experienced the music because we didn't know all those things about them. So you hear this stuff in retrospect, but
there was no Beatles TMZ.
Yeah, they're exactly.
Dirt.
Yeah.
So we saw that. What was interesting to me though was I saw the Rolling Stones are supposed to be the bad boys, and they're doing like Street Fighting Man and all these different things like that. And, you know, I'm thinking street fighting, man. I think John Lennon could take them all on, because I saw pictures of the Beatles when they were in the leather jackets and the things, and you start to read stories about the way those guys were. Well, these are working class guys or lower middle class, in like Ringo grew up in the Dingle over there, you know, and so.
Yeah, that name says it all, right? The Dingle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But one way or the other, you find out that the Beatles are cleaned up by Brian Epstein and had to wear these suits, and the Rolling Stones try to look like bad boys and play more bluesy rock stuff, you know. And in fact, they were the more middle to upper middle class guys in London there. It was just always interesting to me that the Beatles had this image of being the suit guys who were polite boys, and Ed Sullivan to say, "Well, come on, lads," and all this kind of thing. And then the Rolling Stones are on there, and it's like the devil was on TV. Well, it was really, I mean, there were things that were the other way around. You know what I mean?
We'll be back with more from the Boxmasters after these messages. You're listening to Everything Fab Four on Salon.com.
JD, you discovered them after the breakup, right? Like myself.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, totally. I wasn't born until after they were broken up. But yeah, I remember, you know, when I was young, I loved the early stuff, you know, up until Rubber Soul. That's kind of how I got it. But, you know, and also like Tomorrow Never Knows and other songs from the White Album, they scared me. You know, they were just too much for me at that point. You know, when I was young, it was too adventurous, and it just really made me feel uncomfortable. You know, and it wasn't till later on that I, you know, could sit down and listen to it and be like, oh, okay, here's what they're doing. That's, you know, really neat. But, you know, you start playing background or backwards vocals and guitars to, you know, an 8-9-year-old. And the first time you hear it, it's terrifying. You know, it's so, you know, it's, you know, thinking back on it, it's just like, wow, that, you know, it was really profound, you know, when I found those things, because I loved the songs that I could sing and, you know, act like I was playing along with. And, you know, the Chipmunks didn't do any covers of later songs, you know, because there was that Mop Top Chipmunks record that I wore out. And, you know, I loved I loved their versions. I loved the Beatles versions. But it was, you know, really impactful to me. But once you get past that era, you know, it took me several years, you know, later on to really, you know, appreciate it. And
well, it's a legitimate journey, right? I mean, yeah, the Chipmunks do Revolution 9. You know what? That would actually be more terrifying than whatever that exists in Revolution 9. I got the White Album when I was 11, so it would have been 1977. My Aunt Molly got it for me, and I took it upstairs to listen to it. And I'd been mostly an early Beatles guy until that point. And I remember playing it, and I played Glass Onion. And of course, I know what it means now, but it said dovetail joint. And I thought, uh-oh, my dad's going to hear this and I'm going to get in so much trouble. And I think I literally put it away and I thought, I am not ready for this album yet. I've got to wait a little longer. Maybe I need to go spend more time with Help and Rubber Soul just to cleanse myself a little bit. Of course, those were incredible weed albums, as we know now. But, I've been listening in preparation for today to you guys have 13 albums now. And
I have no idea.
I've been really struck by the essential ingredient to me. While I love obviously the British Invasion sounds and your nods to the Beatles and others, it has what another of our previous guests, Steve Van Zandt, said you got to have. The only essential ingredient is energy, and every one of those songs, whether it's a slow number or something upbeat and with a faster tempo, every one of your songs has energy. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the composition of those. How do you put those ideas together?
Well, I mean, like lyrically, there's many stories to be told and many things to be said. And I was fortunate to grow up in a time where there was great poetry in songwriting, and so I'm kind of a stickler for that. I was just telling a guy the other day that I was telling JD too, I said, you have, I was trying to write some stuff with a guy one time, not for my project or anything. And I said, in Nashville, they can rhyme love with hot buttered popcorn. And it's like, I try to stay away from that, but one of the things that we got from specifically the Beatles is they didn't always do a typical song structure. I mean, sometimes they just had verse, chorus, but not always. I mean, and sometimes their songs would start with the chorus. Then they would go into their middle eight and they'd come back to the chorus. And then you have a song like Nowhere Man, which is, it's the two sections repeated, two different sections repeated, I think 3 times, whatever it is. And so we do stuff like that. And in terms of the energy, we honestly play, JD and I make the records by ourselves. I mean, it's just the two of us. So we have to sound live with 2 guys. And so we start out by playing guitar and a scratch vocal and drums. So it's like, that, and you have to create that energy with the drums before the song's even done. So it kind of starts with it. And we're just naturally influenced by, like those guys, like the Kinks are a big influence on us, and so I think we just, in other words, there's no answer for it. We just kind of sound that way.
I mean, one of the ways that we keep it feeling alive, and has, energy and hopefully dynamics is we start the song at the beginning and we go to the end. So, when Billy's playing the drums, when anything that I'm playing, you start at the beginning and you go to the end. So hopefully it'll have, you'll start out, the intro might be kind of strong. Then you bring it down for the verse. Then you bring it back up for the chorus. Maybe bring it up a little bit more for the bridge. And then the outro, you give it everything you got. So, we're going along, what is the song? We're playing the song. And, I think that people can get lost in, I got this cool, little beat, or, a loop or something that you're just playing that kind of stays the same the whole way. So you don't change. So if you're just doing that, it just starts at one level and goes, all the way to the end at that same level. And I think that's just one way that we try to make our songs just feel alive is start at the beginning. All right, where's the count off? Okay, great. 1, 2, 3, 4, go. Play it till the end. Maybe if you stop, you mess up, maybe you pick up, maybe you just go back to the beginning and start again. Which is most of the time what we do. Billy sings the song, we don't just start. It's like, okay, we're going to do the verses, and sing it. No, it's like we start at the beginning. He listens to the whole intro, it's like, then the song starts, he starts singing the verses. It's from top to bottom, it's the whole thing.
A two-man full band, know.
So then it's even more remarkable that you maintain that energy. And like I said, whether it's fast or slow, it doesn't matter. I mean, I was listening just a little while back today to Let the Bleeding Pray, right? And it has that low rumble. There's that kind of low, almost a little roar that exists. And the energy's coming from that, it's pulsing. And obviously it's talking about an important subject, but it's just interesting how many different ways you create that energy. Was that song produced by Jeff Emmerich?
Yeah, that's on the Jeff Emmerich album.
Yeah. What was it like working with him?
It was astounding. We had known Jeff for a number of years, and he told us that he was a big fan of our music. And we were like, wow, that's amazing. He said, I'd love to produce something on you someday. And it finally worked out to where that happened. It was, just by chance that him seeing a studio manager that we know, and it all kind of came together. And here we were working with him, and it's hard to just concentrate on what you're doing when what you really want to do is say, so hey, did Yoko really eat George's cookies? How pissed did he get? It's like whatever. And then he was very willing to tell us those stories, but he was very unwilling to show us exactly what he was doing with those compressors.
Yeah.
And so, but he was cool
because those songs, the first one he did. What was the first one?
I Want to Go Where You Go.
Yeah. So I think that was the first song he mixed, right?
The first song he mixed was called I Want to Go Where You Go. And listen to the vocal on this song, I Want to Go Where You Go, and you will literally hear the treatment that he did to John Lennon's vocal. It's like, just for a second, it's like, wow, I sound as close to John Lennon as I ever will. It's not that close, but it's like, but he did what he did to him. And
so then we would ask him, it's like, or I asked him, it's like, Jeff, what did you do to Billy's voice to make him sound like that? And he's like, I'm not telling you. It's like, okay, I accepted it because, there's just some trade secrets that you just want to kind of keep under your vest, and keep to yourself. And it's like, I get it. But then, I went to Jeff's wake after he passed, or his memorial at Capitol Studios. And, there was just guy after guy of, more heroes of mine of, recording engineers and producers, and everyone would be like, oh, and Jeff was so forthcoming with all of his secrets and, all his tricks and everything like that. And I'm standing in the back just going, that son of a bitch, he just, he kept it all a secret from us, but, it really was a treat, and he really, his whole formative years of growing up was with the Beatles. That whole, from the time he was 16, he was with the Beatles all his whole life. And so everything, he just couldn't help it. He's like, oh yeah, we were out at Paul's farm and, doing this and, something or other. And it's, just every story was kind of, casually about the Beatles. And it was just like unbelievable. He just couldn't, just sat there and just was like, you were there, man. It's like, how the heck?
Yeah, he produced like a Nazareth record or something like that, but he didn't talk about them.
Well, he didn't. Yeah, or working with America, other heroes and friends of ours. And
last conversation with him would have been not too many months before that, and I asked him about just the variety of people he had been working with. And I said, what do you think it is that keeps him coming back? And he said, well, Ken, it's because when they come to me and I record it, I can make it sound like a record. And then when they leave, they're happy because they sound like a record. And I liked that a lot. So maybe that's why he was holding back from you, JD. He wouldn't give you the goods Speaking of the new record, 69, which I love the concept of thinking about yourselves and what a record from 1969 with the Boxmasters would sound like. I just love this record. And the song that I can't stop listening to is A Big Sunshine.
Oh, yeah. That's
I love it. Can you give me some more background on that? It's just, in fact, frankly, it may be the most Beatlesque of the bunch in the sense that it's about an impression more than a pure story, right? Sure. Strawberry Fields Forever is, and I'm telling you guys this, this, doesn't tell you a story. It's an impression, right? It's like painting. And I felt that way when I listened to A Big Sunshine.
I think that might have been the first song we recorded for this record, wasn't it? I think it was because it kind of started out in another session, and then we started writing more songs. I mean, because I think it was.
I don't know.
Pretty close. It might have been the first one we recorded.
I'm pretty sure because the title comes from, I think my youngest son. My wife took a picture with her and the boys or something, and the sun was behind her, and so it's like really kind of the sun was just like directly behind him. And my son said it was a big sunshine. And so I told Billy that, and, I always trust that, if I give Billy a title or say something sounds like a title of a song, that he'll take it and, write stuff, that I couldn't possibly, even fathom. But so, he came up with all the lyrics, I believe, first, and then we put music to it. And we had just got this studio that we're sitting in. This is our new studio, Pepper Tree Hill. And we had just kind of moved in. And so there was still a crew of people like wiring up the console and fixing things and putting stuff in and all that. And so we were kind of stuck out in the live room. Billy's drums were set up and we had a few pieces of gear sitting out there and kind of things waiting to get put away. But we had songs written and we wanted to start recording. And so, we did, the first thing we did was, there's a new Ian Hunter record that just came out a few weeks ago.
Ian was on our show a few weeks ago and we talked about it.
Yeah. And so, the first thing we did was, stuff for the Ian Hunter record that we were thankfully asked to be a part of. And so then after that, it's like, Billy's like, we got songs, got a studio. It's not put together, but let's, figure out, let's just start recording. So we just started putting down kind of work tapes and things like that. And we started doing some tracks, and Chestnut Eyes and A Big Sunshine were two songs that you were out of town. Yeah. And it's like, we got them all recorded all the way, but they needed like lead guitars and, some things. And so Billy went out of town to work for something. And I sat in here and played slide guitar for hours and hours and hours. That just felt like the thing to do. And, it's like, we've recorded already in this studio, it's only been a year and a half or so, and we've already made 4 or 5 records, I think it is. And so, that's, several, it's, 100 songs or so. And it's hard to even remember, which one was, what did we do on that?
Well, I remember on Big Sunshine, just walking around the house. Usually anytime I come up with a melody for a song, I just sort of is natural to sing it that way. And I remember when JD gave me the title and told me the story of his son, walking around singing that melody for the chorus part, the Big Sunshine part. We started there and then we figured out all the spookier stuff later. That's great that you respond to that song. Cause it's, usually people will go straight for the one that sounds kind of like a hit or whatever. And, but we've always loved that song.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm that audience. I get asked and interviewed a lot about what are my favorite Beatles songs, and if I'm telling the truth, it's "Happiness Is a Warm Gun." It's I mean, that's a staggering achievement, right? That song, I can't believe it exists in a lot of ways, and I feel really strongly about that new cut by you guys. It's great.
So, did you have any Beatles songs that weren't really ones that were very popular or played on the TV shows or the radio, that just because you happened to have it, like I had a 45 of "There's a Place," but it was on some kind of yellow label, and I don't even remember what it was now, but it wasn't Capitol, and it wasn't like EMI Parlophone.
Was that on Swan, the yellow label? I think that, or Tolly, or one of those guys. Yeah.
I don't remember what the label was, but I remember it was yellow and kind of looked like the Epic yellow label, but that type of thing. But I just had that single of "There's a Place." And to this day, I love that song simply because I guess it's nostalgic for me because, we were pretty poor and I didn't get my hands on many records, and I just had that 45 and I played it to death. And I think "There's a Place" lasts, like a minute and 10 seconds or something.
It's not 2 minutes. I do have one like that. And it was because, and this may have happened to you too, JD. It was, I remember when the Beatles love songs came out. Remember with it had a fake leather look to it. It was one of the compilations that Capitol was showering on us in the 1970s. And I remember getting it and thinking, damn it, I have all this stuff, I already have this album, but I didn't have "I'll Be Back." And that song, I still am. I was speaking about it just last week to an audience back in PA. That song is just magic to me. The off-rhythm guitar playing, John's vocal, the fact that, it's a song about sadness, right? It's love that's not going to happen. This isn't "She Loves You," right? I remember being struck by that and then not feeling so bad that I had love songs after all.
Yeah, they went from like pure poppy love songs to banging people in the head with a hammer.
Everything Fab Four is presented by Salon.com, the premier news, politics, innovation, and arts website. For more information, visit everythingfab4.com, where you can learn more about our podcast and my latest Beatles-related book, Living the Beatles Legend, The Untold Story of Mal Evans. The Everything Fab Four theme song, "Seize the Day," is provided courtesy of Black Rabbit, the high-octane Beatles cover band, an innovative psychedelic rock project from Rockaway Beach, Queens in New York City. Like what you heard today on Everything Fab Four? Be sure to subscribe, give us a rating, and recommend the show to your friends. Plus, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at EF4 Podcast. Distributed by Salon.com, Everything Fab Four is a Wonderwall production. Remember, it's a Beatles world, and everyone has a story.